With the use of the fourth wall break, Joe is an interesting look into the minds of a stalker and allows us to have a clear insight into how he sees himself, others, and the world around him. But what I love about the show is that view isn't objective. We see the story through his lens, and so we have to question what we see. He's an unreliable narrator. The perfect example of this is as early as the very first scene of the show, way back when I didn't have back pains.
You have enough cash to cover this, but you want me to know your name.
A simple act of paying with cash was seen as more than what it was. He had no way of knowing what she had in her wallet, and even if she did have cash, so what? I guess by his logic, I want the local kebab place to stalk me in Tesco. Just getting a call from him in the middle of the night, so loyalty card means nothing these days, yeah? Ho. But the fact is, there are two versions of Joe. I'm not talking about Reese, we'll come back to that. There is good Joe and bad Joe. Throughout the seasons, we see him seesaw between these two personas depending on the last act that he did. Was it an evil act? He is the devil. Was it a good act? Amazing, he's truly become a saint. It's like my taste in women, seesawing between goths and muscle mummies depending on what was the last one I saw. Too much information? Probably. Relatable? For sure. Anyway, this then culminates in the finale as he finally accepts his dark side. He's been fighting for so long. I think this is the reason why so many people are excited for the final season, as the Joe we saw at the end no longer had these emotional strains. We get to see his dark side fully unleashed. I'm entirely basing this on the end of season 4 and the trailers because the final season isn't out at the time of posting this video. This is very different from Book Joe, but if you want to know more about that, I did a full video on Book Joe versus TV show Joe. I'll link it in the description for anyone who wants to go watch that. In this video, I'm going to be exclusively focusing on Netflix Joe. So, as the seasons progress, he starts to view his dark passenger differently. At first, he views it as an addiction he can manage, before coming to an understanding that he can't. I think the biggest shift in this ideology is in season 2, which starts the second phase of his character. He is beginning to admit he has a problem instead of simply viewing himself as the victim. But the problem is he then proceeds to enter a repetitive loop of trying to fix it, indulging, and falling off the deep end. While he does vocally admit he can't pursue love, his actions would demonstrate otherwise. I mean, you can't tell me you're not pursuing someone and then get a place opposite hers that you can look into it with a telescope. Mixed messages. At the end of the day, just like an alcoholic trying to have one sip, it never works and he keeps relapsing. That being said, he does have a code. He has a fundamental belief that he only hurts people who deserves it and has to protect the weak and helpless. But these rules are arbitrary, based on his own internal judgment. He views himself as judge then executioner, not a serial killer. And we know for a fact that this isn't true, as we know that Joe has been willing to kill people for self-preservation. But this just goes to show how much he deludes himself. I should say that he does show varying degrees of guilt depending on who he kills. Benji, fuck that guy. Just another Tuesday. But he did show real remorse the time he thought he'd killed Delilah, who in his eyes didn't deserve to die. And this is also why once he hurts Marianne, a direct contradiction to this fundamental belief of himself as a protector, he splits into Reese because he can't handle it. By the way, I love the episode where they show Joe from Marianne's perspective, showing those creepy long pauses where you know there's internal dialogue, but for the first time you can't hear it. It really changes the way people looked at Joe, me included. Peak cinema. So I guess the question is, how can he possibly view himself as a protector given all he's done? Firstly, I think the acts of good he does, protecting Parco, freeing Will, allows him to really believe that he's turning over a new leaf. Like me every New Year's eyeing the gym membership. Like, it ain't gonna happen, but the hope still remains. But I think in general, this delusion can be summed up with one quote.
Not worried. I've seen enough romantic comedies to know guys like me are always getting in jams like this.
Joe sees himself as a protagonist of a romantic comedy, a sort of Ryan Reynolds or Tom Hanks from the late 90s, early 2000s. He's a love-struck idiot who goes above and beyond for his woman, the working class hero. It allows him to justify a lot of his actions because they're simply obstacles that are in the way of their happiness. The second act before the final declaration of love. I do think there's probably a discussion to have about the greater point of good guys in romantic comedies doing really messed up things. I mean, the perfect example of this is Barney Stinson from How I Met Your Mother. He's a beloved character. He's many people's favorite character, mine included. He's a loyal friend, he's a romantic at heart, he's got charisma, he's also a piece of shit who lies to women to get sex. Like, if you actually think about what he's done objectively, he is off his nutter and should be in prison. He cons, manipulates, and has generally been shown to disrespect women to a criminal degree. Literally, in a throwaway line, he mentions he might have sex trafficked a girl. Lock this man up. But in the end, Ignoring the original ending, which was trash, and focused on the alternative ending, which in my brain is canon and should be in yours, he gets his happily ever after. Quick side note, Kristen Milotti, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I'm trying my best, is one of the most underrated actresses of our time. Every single thing I've seen her in, she is nailed. Wolf of Wall Street, nailed. Palm Beach, nailed. Penguin, nailed. How I Met Your Mother, nailed. Whatever award she qualified for, just give it to her. Just give her all the awards. Go watch Penguin if you don't believe me. But anyway, back to Barney. This is how Joe sees it. He's a good guy underneath it all, and the right woman can save him. Their love is just being tested, and he needs to pass this test to get to the end. This romantic comedy aspect also gives him internal permission to judge people very quickly, because romantic comedy have traits and stereotypes. The douchebag, the girl next door, the funny sidekick, the weird man-child main character who gets all the baddies. Very easy boxes for the audience to recognize. He of course knows which box he fulfills, the underdog who gets the beautiful girl. So in turn, he has to put other people into other boxes. But the fact is, that's not the world he's looking at.
You are busy gazing at a goddamn fantasy.
This quote is the theme of the show. While he is suspicious of these women, he also creates idealized versions of them, creating them to be main characters in his romantic comedy rather than people, and then being angry when they don't live up to his expectations. Which is especially true considering his proclivity for broken women. This is most evident with his relationship with Love. To be fair on him, she didn't give any indication that she was more loony than the cast of Space Jam. But alas, in the end, Joe got the girl. He's perfect girl in a broken way. Very Macbeth, but let's be honest, he couldn't get, nor does he want, a girl who isn't fucked up, messed in the head, because then he couldn't save her. But Love, like Joe, considers herself a protector rather than needing the protection that Joe feels like he should provide. Anyway, he got the life he claimed he wanted, and it didn't make him happy. And the show really did give him the full shebang. A wife that bakes, a beautiful child, a white picket fence. It literally couldn't be more normal, happy family aesthetically, but it didn't make him happy. I think to a lesser extent, this tendency for avoiding normalcy is also shown with his relationship with Karen, who was emotionally stable, but he was still miserable, stalking Beck a couple times a day. This shows that despite his constant repetition of devotion, it is in fact a lie, because once he gets married, he delves into old habits. He's lying to the audience, he's lying to the people around him, and he's lying to himself. He's justifying it by claiming that Love isn't the woman for him. And to be fair, I do think that he stopped loving her the minute he realized what she was, not because of her actions, but because she was a reflection of the part of himself that he hated the most. I mean, it's not like she did anything that he hasn't done a million times, but he believes that his moral compass is just while others is broken. Again, this links to the rom-com bit, different rules for me than you because I'm the main character. Do as I say, not as I do. However, I do feel that he would feel the same way with any woman, because at the end of the day, he doesn't want the realities of dating and marriage. He just wants a romantic comedy. The trailer of the last season does seem to back this idea, as he does seem to be back to cheating. And it's not like Kate's out here murdering anyone, as far as we've seen so far. But the question is, how does Joe change over the course of the show? Season 1, Joe has a defining trait that the other seasons lack. It's his fundamental belief in his innocence. Despite being a murderer, he views himself as the victim of the Candace situation. And so it makes his dynamic different with Beck, as this is the only time we see him actively pursuing his love interest without any reservations. He's fully invested in his stalker behavior. He's not viewing it as an addiction, but as a necessity. He sees himself as the one in danger, emotionally speaking.
I had to be sure you're safe.
And so sees nothing wrong with his actions. The problem starts with season 2, because he can no longer view himself that way. He's now murdered Beck and a few other people. He has a better understanding that his actions are unacceptable and is beginning to understand that he's not the hero of this story, but the villain. Ironically though, I do think this makes him a little bit more comfortable with murder, because despite his emotional reprehensions, he now understands it's a character trait of his. He's now saying that he won't be bad for other people, that Love doesn't deserve a murderer and Henry doesn't deserve a murderer, rather than saying it's not who he is, because he knows it is who he is, and he's trying to fight that. Either way, season 2 begins, and he's now more reluctant to start his relationship with Love, so he's delaying them being together. Probably should have stuck with that one, Joe. But then season 3 rolls around and he has a scapegoat, because he's surrounded by someone who is, in theory, more impulsive than him, but just as crazy. He is stuck spending his time with a murderer, allowing him to once again adopt a victim mentality. Love is the one that's leading the journey. He's just following it and trying to protect his family, without realizing that he's just doing the same thing he's always done. I mean, he also killed Marianne's boyfriend. He didn't do that for love. It was just a return to old patterns. I mean, this doesn't last until season 4 because he kills Love, and also he feels like Marianne now sees him as a monster. His internal conflict can no longer have something to blame, and so it creates a manifestation of his dark nature. The man called Reese. This is the beginning of the second shift in his character, which means that Joe is now entering his third phase. Reese is just Joe without the emotional turmoil about his sins. In the end, their actions are no different, but it's his lack of remorse that separates him. This is very reminiscent of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I think the term unreliable narrator has never been more accurate than when discussing season 4, as the whole thing is a fantasy. Joe is hallucinating people, messages, events, completely different to the reality of the situation. I am curious how long it took you to figure out that Reese was in Joe's head. I feel like I figured it out semi-quickly, I'd say about 2 episodes before the reveal, but I was hoping they'd do something a bit more exciting and keep Reese as a real person. I shouldn't complain though, they really made my point with that story arc. Interestingly, season 4 is also the season where Joe is least willing to kill when he's in his right mind, not killing as himself until the real Reese. This potentially demonstrates that his other side has taken some of his violent tendencies with him. And then enters Kate. Ironically, the acceptance of Kate is what allows him to go full Mr. Hyde, as he finally gets what he wanted, to feel seen and accepted, which of course isn't actually the case because Kate doesn't know everything he's done. I'm really curious how much of what he's done she would be willing to accept. Like a male podcast channel, I have to ask the question, what body count is too high? By the end of the day, we can't discuss Joe without discussing his childhood. He obviously had an abusive childhood. He never had a male figure who didn't hurt him. His father was abusive to him and his mother, and Mooney was imprisoning him. This has definitely had an effect on his relationship with men, as he clearly shows no desire or ability to connect with men in the show. The closest friend he has in his life is probably Ethan, but I would say they're more work colleagues. I don't think he actually likes him all that much. And I guess 40, but that was more like 40 following him around. He was befriending 40 to keep Love happy. I never think he actually really liked him. I mean, he openly thinks about ways of getting rid of him once he gets with Love. And then obviously in the 4th season, we also see that when he enters the male space, he struggles to fit in. I mean, he almost kills one of them. However, this struggle is most clearly shown when Henry is born, and he's disappointed. He was expecting a girl who would live within the boundaries of his delusion. But no, Henry was born a boy. Joe doesn't understand how men and boys can interact in a healthy way. Women, he knows his role, but a boy, he doesn't know what to do about that because he never had a role model to show him. This is a bit of a weird point though, because he does seem to have a good relationship with Parker in season 1, which sort of implies that he does know how to father a son. But I guess it might be different when it's your own child. I don't know, I don't have children yet, so I can't speak to it. But I think we can all agree that the most impactful relationship of Joe is his mother and women in general.
The most valuable things in life are usually the most helpless.
I mean, this is just creepy. I know he's talking about books, but like, it's a creepy thing to say to anyone, but especially a child in your basement. But he's not just talking about books, is he? It's his philosophy regarding women. Again, this allows him to see himself as a protector, not a stalker, a dark knight of sorts.
I'm Batman.
I mean, what man wouldn't protect what he loves, and he's doing what he must? But in reality, he's white knighting and he's just afraid of abandonment. He has a need to be needed because his mother left him, and he thinks that if he does all these things for these women, they won't leave him too. He's just repeating a cycle of violence, abuse, and abandonment, as proven by the fact that he also abandons his own child. So I think the real question is, we've talked a lot about Joe's negative traits and about his character, but why do people still fawn over Joe? You see a lot of people online talking about how hot he is and how desirable he is. But why? By the way, this isn't a rhetorical question. I do have a theory. But to be clear, I'm not a therapist or a psychologist, so take what I say with a grain of salt. It's just my opinion. Firstly, I do think it's fair to say he does have some good traits. He talks about cooking, he cleans, he loves kids, he cares about the little things, he's supportive, he portrays himself as deep, he reads, which I'm guessing is a big thing for book talk. But he also makes the women he is with feel seen. Through the bushes, but still seen. And shows an interest in their passion. I mean, aside from the killing and the stalking, I can see how a lot of these positive traits do appeal to people. The audience watching it and thirsting of him is probably just justifying it that they would be different if it was with them. They wouldn't do the bad things that Beck does, like cheat, or they wouldn't do the terrible thing that Love does, like kills. The Joe that they desire is not the Joe who's there, but the Joe that he thinks himself to be, partially justifying some of his actions. Plus a bit of danger. Who doesn't like the danger of sex behind some bins? God, I probably shouldn't have said that.
I shouldn't have said that. I should not have said that.
Anyway, I don't think many people are imagining the killer that they want, but they want the good without the bad. Or, you know, tell me in the comments if I'm way off the mark and why you're thirsty for him. I mean, I'm not saying this from a place of judgment. I love Harley Quinn and she's probably nuttier than he is, so...
I got an itch I thought you could help me scratch, cowboy.
Mark me down as scared and horny.
Yeah, to each their own. But I will say that this is super intentional by the show creator. Joe in the book is very different. I don't think anyone will find Joe in the book sexy. He has none of the positive traits. They added so much grey area for Joe to be likable. But like I said earlier, if you want the full breakdown, just watch the other video and see why I hate Joe with a burning passion of 1,000 suns.
I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
To conclude, Joe is actually a very well-written deconstruction of how a rom-com character couldn't work in real life, but how a lot of stalker and creeps think, to a lesser extent. I am interested to see what they do in the final season. I think if this video gets 100 likes or more, I'll do a part 2 updating it with the final season. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe. If you don't, Joe will show up at your house. You have been warned, so, you know, don't want to say anything, but you better do it.
Do it! Just do it!
No, but in all seriousness, I'm really curious to see if you have any good theories on how the show will end, or, you know, how you'd want the show to end. A lot of people have been throwing around death or prison, but he might become a lumberjack. Yes, I still haven't forgiven Dexter for the finale. If you aren't sick of my voice yet, go check out my other YouTube videos, or, you know, subscribe and wait for the next video. Otherwise, until next time, folks, have a good one.